Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video I'm going to give you some tips about IELTS speaking section. Okay, so let's get started. We've got two kinds of IELTS, academic and general module. Okay, but in both the speaking section is the same. Okay, so well, what do you have to do in the speaking section? The part 1 is called Introduction and Interview, part 2 is Long Term, and part 3 is Discussion. But I personally put it this way, which is much easier. Part 1, I would call it Small Talk, part 2, Tell a Story, and part 3, Discuss Big Ideas. Okay. Now I'm going to give you some more details on each part of the IELTS speaking section. In small talk, or part 1, the key to success is to elaborate. Okay? You need to extend and expand your answer. The examiner will ask you some personal questions about your background, your education, your job, and things like that. Okay? So do not just give yes or no answers or very short answers. Okay? So if the examiner asks you something like this, are you a student or do you work? You cannot just simply say, I'm a student or I'm a teacher. You need to elaborate on your answer. Okay? Give longer answer to show the fact that you are aware of using the language correctly and professionally. Okay? So you can say something like this. I've been studying languages for the past 5 or 6 years in a blah blah university, and now I'm looking for a job. I'm working for a language institute part-time. So things like this. Try to elaborate and give longer answer. Okay? Or the examiner might ask you, where do you live? Okay? You cannot just give the name of the city or the country where you live or where you come from, okay? Because this is very banal and it's very unprofessional. So you need to talk about the place where you come from in more details, okay? Give some geographical facts, give some general interesting facts about the place where you come from, okay? The country or the city, okay? And the location of the city or the country, okay? So sometimes, you know, there's a transition from relevant questions to quite irrelevant questions, okay? So you need to be ready and flexible for such questions, okay? For example, they ask you questions about your background, your job, and for example, the place where you come from, and suddenly they, jump to a question about your hobbies or about something else which is not closely relevant to this types of the questions they asked for. Okay, so you should be ready and flexible for such questions. Okay, now part 2, which is called Tell a Story. Okay, in this part you will be given a topic card or a cue card with a question on it. Okay, and the key to success in this part is to you need to tell a good story. Okay, not just a boring one. Okay, you have 1 minute to think, and then you need to speak for like 2 minutes in this part. So one of the keys to success here is to embellish. Okay, basically it means you need to lie. Well, don't worry, IELTS examination is a test of language. It's not a test of honesty. So it's perfectly fine to lie and to embellish. Okay, so embellish basically means make a story more interesting by adding extra details that are often untrue. Okay, because if you just stick with the facts and then give some concrete ideas, you know, the examiner might lose interest in your answer, and then eventually it would affect your score negatively. Okay. Another key point about part 2 of IELTS speaking section is to digress. Digress means leave the main topic of conversation temporarily, but it's still relevant. Okay. Sometimes you need to go off topic and then come back on topic again. Okay. For example, they ask you something like describe something that you own, which is important to you, okay? And you should also say where you got it from, okay? Now here you can talk about one of your personal possessions, okay? Something like watch, for example, okay? You can talk about your watch, and at the same time, do not just merely talk about watch. You can talk about who gave it to you, why is it important, and then even sometimes go off topic, okay? And the reason why it matters to you, okay? So this is called digress. Now let's move on to part 3 of the IELTS speaking section, okay? Which is, as I said before, discuss big ideas. The key to success is similar to part 1. You need to elaborate, okay? You need to sound philosophical and use abstract language here, okay? And abstract ideas, because you need to show off, not just use basic ideas, okay? Because it would reduce your score, okay? Now, what does it mean, be thoughtful or use abstract language, okay? Because this is a key point, this is vital in part 3, or the discussion part of IELTS speaking section, okay? You need to use less common but more precise words. You need to use more varied but accurate grammar, okay? And generally speaking, try to sound more complex and sophisticated in this part. The examiner might ask you something like this, which is relevant to part 2 of IELTS speaking section. How can you control anger? You cannot simply say, breathe deeply, okay, or drink a glass of water. This is very simple and basic. You need to say something like, well, anger is a natural feeling to express, provided you do not hurt anyone. So this is just an example. You can elaborate and give more ideas about anger and the feelings and things like that, but do your best to sound philosophical and more sophisticated. Okay, so to wrap it up, I just at the end of the video I give you some tips about IELTS speaking criteria, okay, based on which the examiners decide about your score. Number 1, fluency and coherence. Number 2, vocabulary. Number 3, grammar. And number 4, pronunciation. So I will be talking about these criteria later in another video. Thanks for watching and take care.